Chapter 6, Control and Coordination of Science, Class 10th. That is the Biology chapter 2nd. So, in the previous chapter, we looked at life processes involved in the maintenance functions in living organisms, like the digestive system, respiratory system, transportation system, and the excretory system. Okay. There, we had started with a notion we all have that if we see something moving, it's alive. Okay, so some of these movements are in fact the result of growth, as in plants. So a seed germinates and grows, and we can see that the seedling moves over the course of a few days. It pushes the soil aside and comes out. But if this growth were to be stopped, these movements would not happen. Some movements, as in many animals and some plants, are not connected with growth. Okay, so a cat running, children playing on swings, buffaloes chewing cud, these are not movements caused by growth. Okay, why do we associate such visible movements with life? A possible answer that we can think of is that we can think of movement as a response to a change in the environment of the organism. Okay, now here the cat may be running because it has seen a mouse. Okay, not only that, we also think of movement as an attempt by living organisms to use changes in their environment to their advantage. Okay, so plants grow out into the sunshine. Children try to get pleasure and fun out of swinging. Buffaloes chew cud to help break up the tough food so as to be able to digest it better. Okay, now when bright sunlight is focused on our eyes or when we touch a hot object, we detect the change and respond to it with movement in order to protect ourselves. Okay, now if we think a bit more about this, it becomes apparent that all this movement in a response to the environment is carefully controlled. Each kind of change in the environment evokes an appropriate movement in response. Okay, and when we want to talk to our friends in class, we whisper rather than shouting loudly. Why? The teacher is there, isn't it? Now, therefore, such controlled movement must be connected to the recognition of various events in the environment, followed by only the correct movement in response. Okay, so in other words, living organisms must use systems providing control and coordination. Okay, in keeping with the general principles of body organ organization in multicellular organisms, specialized tissue are used to provide these control and coordination activities. Okay, so we are starting with the section 6.1 animals. Okay, nervous system. Now, in animals, such control and coordination are provided by the nervous and muscular tissue. Okay, so this. Wait, hold on. Okay. Now, which we have studied in class 9th. This what provides control and coordination. We have studied it in class 9th. Touching a hot object is an urgent and dangerous situation for us. We need to detect it and respond to it. Now, how do we detect that we are touching a hot object? All information from our environment is detected by the specialized tips of some nerve cells. Okay. These receptors are usually located in our sense organs, such as the inner ear, the nose, the tongue, and so on. So, gustatory receptors will detect taste, while olfactory receptors will detect smell. One more question. There we go. Okay. Now, this information acquired at the end of the dendritic tip of a nerve cell, okay, sets off a chemical reaction that creates an electrical impulse. This impulse travels from the dendrites to the cell body, okay, and then along the axon to its end. And at the end of the axon, the electric impulse sets off to release some chemicals. Now, while I'm saying this, you might be confused on what the cell body, what the axon and impulse is, all that. Okay, so I'll explain that here. So, at the end of the axon, now let's know about the nucleus before continuing. Sorry, let's know about this nerve before continuing. This is the cell body, okay, and it's also called the soma. Now, this soma has a cell membrane. Okay, these cell membrane they go through the axon, that is this long unbranched thing, okay, through which the impulse means the electrochemical charge, okay, that thing travels, okay, and this membrane is now not the cell membrane but it is called the uh, axolemma. Okay, no need to learn those. And there are some nerves which have some special fat coating called the myelin sheath, and this myelin sheath is made out of fat, one thing. And the next thing is some nerves have it, some doesn't. The ones which has it is called myelinated neurons, and which doesn't is non-myelinated neurons. And beside from the myelin sheath, this has also another layer of protection called the uh, neurolemma. Okay, neurolemma is made out of Schwann cells. So neurolemma are somewhat like this, and they are responsible for secreting fat for the production of the myelin sheath. Okay, I hope you understood this. Now, what is an impulse here? So before continuing, one more part of the two more parts of the neuron that I forgot to discuss. They're the nerve endings. Okay, these are the nerve endings. These nerve endings are where information of this neuron goes to the next one, and these are some special places. This round thing, okay, called the synaptic knots. Synaptic knots. Okay, okay, important things here. This is called the synaptic knots because later on some part of the synapse will come and you will be confused if you don't know what that means. Now, more about this dendrites. Okay, these dendrites are these hairy and branched processes that comes out of the soma or the cell body. And what are the peculiarity of these dendrites? These dendrites connect to the nerve ending, okay, of another neuron in front of it, okay, and it doesn't physically connect because there is a gap between them, which we shall discuss now, I think. Now, these dendrites, they receive the impulse, that is, they receive the message, okay, and it goes through the cell body to the axon, and it goes through the axon and finally into the nerve ending. And now, in the nerve ending, the impulse, that is the information, they go and to connect to another pair or some other dendrites. Now, let's say that this is your eye and this is your pupil, things like that. Now you have light, it converges and meets here, okay. Now what will then there is a part called the optic nerve, right? Now what will the optic nerve do? Will it transport the image as it is? No. The thing is, these cell membranes, okay, every cell has a membrane, and this membrane has a charge of minus 70 millivolts. You don't need to remember this, just listen. Minus 70 millivolts. So it makes it into 30 millivolts. Okay, so only nervous tissue and muscle tissue can do this. And when it does that, there is an electrochemical charge. Okay, we call it electrochemical charge. Okay, and that is the impulse. That electrochemical charge which the neurons can transport to the brain, okay, that is the impulse. Okay, now I have told you that now I have told you before that the nerves doesn't actually connect to each other, okay. So what's going on here? See, for the electric charge to travel, imagine this is a conducting material and this is a conducting material, and this one is charged. So, and if this has a charge, okay, and it has to transport the charge into this one, then both of these must be in contact. Then only the charge will be in both rather than just one. But here's the thing. We said that the nerves, they carry information using electrochemical charge. So how do these work? Now these are all for just understanding the concept. There is nothing that you need to know here. If there is something that you need to know or understand from here, I will say that, okay. This is the case of a nerve, okay, how the impulse that is transported. This is the synaptic knot. I told you to be careful on that, and that is the synaptic knot. And I'll write the definition of something called a synapse. Okay. Now, A submicroscopic region between two neuron submicroscopic gap, okay, the gap between nerve ending and uh, another nerve beginning. That is called as synapse. Now, before I continue, please do note I did a whole tank of research. Okay, from the morning, I did a lot of research, and I understood a lot of things, and that's how I'm telling you this right now. So please just subscribe. Man, today was eventful. Now, here, this thing is the synaptic knot. Synaptic knot. This membrane is the presynaptic membrane. Okay, and these has some special kind of vesicles, as you can see. Now these are the synaptic vesicles. Synaptic vesicles. Okay. Uh, so this part, okay, this entire part where there is nothing, as you can see, that is also called the synaptic cleft. Okay, and what happens is that this synaptic cleft will have some calcium ions. Okay, it will have calcium ions. Okay, now what happens is like this. So as you can see in the very cheap animation that I made, the calcium ions goes in, okay, and it brings the synaptic vesicles, okay, and it brings it closer to the synaptic membrane, presynaptic membrane. Okay, now the peculiarity of these vesicles is that they have something inside them called the neurotransmitters. Now, when these synaptic vesicles, okay, they, after reaching here, they like come out and things like that, and the neurotransmitters are released onto the synaptic cleft. Now what happens is that the neurotransmitters diffuse inside. Okay, they diffuse inside, and by their diffusion they will open some miniature gates through which the calcium, potassium ions, they go in and go out, and by the transfer of the moving of ions, a charge is created, and that's how the impulse from this goes to this. But mostly in this part, the only thing that you have to learn is the gap between two neurons, okay, and that is called synapse. That is the main thing that you have to learn here, and all the other things, as I said, all these are just for your clarity, okay, because these things might be deleted. I have no idea. Okay, I'm not that good in biology, but again, I did a bit of research so that I can make this video quite good. Now, at the end of the axon, the electrical impulse set off the release of some chemicals. Okay, and what are these chemicals? Neurotransmitters, I told you. These chemicals cross the gap or the synapse and start a similar electrical impulse in a dendrite of the next neuron. Okay, just like I told you. This is a general scheme of how nervous impulse travels in a body. A similar synapse finally allows the delivery of such impulses from neurons to the other cell, just as muscle cells or gland. Okay, now it is thus no surprise that nervous tissue is made up out of an organized network of nerve cells or neurons and is specialized for conducting information via electrical impulses, okay, from one part of the body to another. Look at figure 6.1a and identify the parts of a neuron where information is acquired, through which information travels. That is where the information is acquired. You need to know that, through which information travels as an electrical impulse, okay, and where this impulse must be converted into a chemical signal for onward transmission. Activity 6.1, put some sugar in your mouth. How does it taste? Block your nose by pressing it by your thumb and index finger. Now eat sugar again. Is there any difference in taste? Now while eating lunch, block your nose in the same way and notice if you can fully appreciate the taste of the food you're eating. Okay, I guess we'll do this experiment. Now, is there a difference in how sugar and food taste if your nose is blocked? If so, why might this happen? Read and talk about possible explanations for these kind of differences. Do you come across a similar situation when you have a cold? Now, what I think is that this gustatory and olfactory receptors both work while we are eating food. So we get the smell, we get the good smell, and we get the good taste. Okay, and that's why we appreciate the food. But if we don't get the smell, then it would be only the taste. Okay. So similar tricks can be used in eating many vegetables that we usually tend to not like. Just close your nose and then eat it. No other way. What happens in a reflex action? The next thing. Okay, so reflex is a word we use very commonly when we talk about some sudden action in response to something in the environment. We say, I jumped out of the way of the bus reflexly, or I pulled my hand back from the flame reflexly, or I was so hungry my mouth started watering reflexly. What exactly do we mean by saying reflexly in every sentence? So, a common idea in all such examples is that we do something without thinking about it or without feeling in control of our reactions. Yet, these are situations when we are responding with some action to change in our environment. Uh, how is control and coordination achieved in such situations? So let us consider this further. Take one of our examples. So touching a flame is an urgent and dangerous situation for us, or in fact for any animal. Might not be for some. How would we respond to this? One seemingly simple way is to think consciously about the pain and the possibility of getting burned. Okay, and therefore move our hand. One important question then is, for how long will it take us to think all this? The answer might depend on how we think. If nerve impulses are sent around the way we have talked about earlier, then thinking is also likely to involve in the creation of such impulses. Thinking is a complex activity, so it is bound to involve a complicated interaction of many nerve impulses from many neurons. If this is the case, it is no surprise that the thinking tissue in our body consists of dense network of intricately arranged neurons. It sits in the forward end of the skull and receives signal from all over the body, which it thinks about before responding to them. Obviously, in order to receive these signals, this thinking part of our brain in the skull must be connected to the nerves coming from various parts of the body. Similarly, if this part of the brain is to instruct muscles to move, nerves must carry this signal back to the different part of the body. If all of this is to be done when we touch a hot object, it may take enough time for us to get burnt. Okay, so all this process is happening, even though we might feel that it is instant or things like that, it will take some time and it will be quite enough for us to get burned. Now, how does the design of the body solve this problem? Rather than having to think about the sensation of heat, when the nerves that detect heat were to be connected to the nerves that move the muscles in a simpler way, the process of detecting the signal or the input and responding to it by an output action might be completed quickly. Okay, in such a connection is commonly known as the reflex arc. This is the reflex arc. Okay, we shall see this. Where should such reflex arc connections be made between the input nerve and the output nerve? The best place, of course, would be at the point where they first meet each other. The nerves from all over the body meet in a bundle, okay, in the spinal cord on their way to the brain. Reflex arcs are formed in this spinal cord itself, although the information input also goes on to reach the brain. Of course, reflex arcs have evolved in animals because the thinking process of the brain is not fast enough. Okay, in fact, many animals have very little or none of the complex neuron network needed for thinking. So, it is quite likely that the reflex arcs have evolved as efficient ways of functioning in the absence of true thought process. However, even after complex neuron network have come into existence, reflex arcs continue to be more efficient for quick response. So here's the thing. Oopsies. Here's a very hot object, okay, and you're like "Doo, doo, 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 doo," and accidentally touch it there, and you'll be like, and you'll just take it out, okay, as quickly as possible, and you won't even think that you're taking it out. Spontaneous reaction that occurs in response to stimuli. Okay. Now, what happens is that when you touch this object, the neuron here it feels the pain or the heat in the that is the receptors in the skin feels the heat or pain. Now, this spontaneously gives a message to the spinal cord using something called the sensory neuron. Okay, the spinal cord is part of the central nervous system. That is, the brain and the spinal cord are called the are part of the central nervous system. The spinal cord gets this message, okay, and there is something called the relay neuron here. Relay neuron, it sends a message back using the motor neuron to the muscles in the arm, okay, and it says get back here. So the uh, hand will be taken away from that hot pot, okay, which almost burnt you. Now, at the same time, this spinal cord, that is the part of the central nervous system, the brain is also a part of central nervous system. Okay, so what it does is basically this spinal cord sends this message to the brain. Boom. Now, you might be asking, the hand is taken away, you're safe from danger. Why do we have to move away why do we have to send this message to the brain? The thing is that if we don't do that, we'll be absolutely stupid. Okay, so basically, if the message doesn't receive in the brain, we'll not know that this is dangerous. Basically, okay, it won't be stored in the brain that touching a hot pot is dangerous, and the monkey brain of a human will go and touch that hot pot again if it doesn't save it in its memory that that is a hot pot. Now, can you trace the sequence of events which occurs when a bright light is focused on your eyes? I think when bright lights is like focused on our eye, and it's like so like too much for our eyes, then the optic nerve receives it, and this is much closer to the brain. I think this will go to the occipital lobe, which we shall learn later, and it will understand that this is too much, and it will go back to the eye into this part, and then it will tell the people close your eyes, or to shrink the eyelids, sorry, the pupil. Okay, anything of that sort might happen. I'm not sure if it will go to the spinal cord. Okay, but again, things like this is there, so the reflex arc should be learned. Okay. Now we have two types of reflexes. Where's that? Nothing of that sort. Don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me, don't tell me. Yo, I researched too much, bro. So there are two types of reflex actions, the inborn reflex actions and the concurrent reflex actions. Oh, yeah. Sorry, the two types of reflexes are inborn reflex and what? Conditioned reflex. Okay, not concurrent, conditioned. So here's the thing. Many portions are deleted in here. That is quite important. You see how there is something called CNS here, and do you understand what a CNS is? That's the thing. Here are some deleted portions that are quite important for understanding this chapter, but it's deleted because CBSE, what can I do? Nervous system. Nervous system can be divided into three. These are the central nervous system. So the central nervous system, that is the CNS. Now you understand why they use CNS? Okay, so the central nervous system has two things, that is the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, after that we have the peripheral nervous system. That is the PNS, and this is consisting of cranial, that is from our brain, cranial and spinal nerves. Okay, and then we have the autonomous, not autonomous, autonomic nervous system, which contains sympathetic and parasympathetic. Nerves. What are the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves? So it gives you control. Like for example, sympathetic nerves might ask your heart rate to increase, but you can't just go on like making your heart rate go on increasing, right? You need it to stop somewhere, or you need it to slow down. So parasympathetic nerves come into existence. They say heart rate decrease. Okay, so usually sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves have opposite functions. Now about reflex actions. Two types of reflex actions: inborn reflex and the conditioned reflex. Now these inborn reflex, they are what they are obtained from birth. You can't make it better or forget it, and the reflex arc is fixed. Okay, like blinking of the eyes, that's fixed. But conditioned reflex, you can make it better by practice. You can forget it also. You need to learn it after birth, and the reflex arc can be modified for it. Okay, like playing the guitar, instruments, cycling, coding, writing, and things like that. Yeah, that is conditioned reflex. You can make, and also these are the examples. Okay, so these are the two types of reflex actions. Now, I think that there are more deleted syllabus in the part of the human brain that's important also. Like the what? So, the process of detecting the signals or the input and responding to it by an output action might be completed quickly. Such a connection is commonly called a reflex arc. Now we are going to the main part. Human brain. Is reflex action the only function of the spinal cord? So, is reflex action the only function of the spinal cord? Obviously not, since we know that we are thinking beings. Okay, so the spinal cord is made out of nerves which supply information to think about. Thinking involves more complex mechanisms and neural connections. Okay, so these are concentrated in the brain, which is the main coordinating center of the body. The brain and the spinal cord constitute the central nervous system, CNS. They receive information from all parts of the body and integrate it. We also think about our actions. Okay, writing, talking, moving a chair, clapping at the end of a program are examples of voluntary actions which are based on deciding what to do next. Okay, so the brain also has to send messages to the muscles. This is the second way in which the nervous system communicates with the muscles. The communication between the central nervous system and the other part of the body is facilitated by the peripheral nervous system, constituting of cranial nerves arising from the brain and spinal nerves arising from the spinal cord. The brain thus allows us to think and take actions based on that thinking. As you will expect, this is accomplished through a complex design with different parts of the brain responsible for integrating different inputs and outputs. The brain has three such major parts or regions, namely the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The forebrain is the main thinking part of the brain. It has regions which receive sensory impulses from various receptors. Separate areas of the forebrain are specialized for hearing, smell, sight, and so on. There are separate areas of association where this sensory information is interpreted by putting it together with the formation from other receptors as well as with information that is already stored in the brain. Okay, based on all this, a decision is made about how to respond, and the information is passed on to the motor area which controls the movement of voluntary muscles, for example, our leg muscles. Okay, however, certain sensations are distinct from seeing or hearing. For example, how do we know what we have eaten? How do we know that we have eaten enough? So the answer to this question is the thalamus. The answer to that question is thalamus. Okay. The sensation of feeling full is because of the center associated with hunger, which is a separate part of the forebrain. The thalamus, hypothalamus is here, which means the thalamus is somewhere around here. These two are thalamuses. Now this is the brain, as you can see. This front part is called the forebrain. Then we have the cerebrum here. This part is the cerebrum. We have cranium, which is the skull that protects the brain. Then we have the midbrain. Okay, midbrain. We have spinal cord. Okay, and a cerebellum, medulla oblongata, the pons, pituitary gland over here that facilitates the growth of a person. Okay, the pons, the medulla oblongata, and cerebellum are in the hindbrain. Okay, and this is hypothalamus. Study the labeled diagram of the human brain. We have seen that the different part have specific functions. So can you find out what the function of each parts are? or is. Now, let us look at the other use of the word reflex that we have talked about in the introduction. Our mouth waters when we see food we like without our meaning to. Our hearts beat without our thinking about it. In fact, we can control these activities easily by thinking about them if we wanted to. Do we have to think about or remember to breathe or digest food? Okay. So in between like the simple reflex actions like change in the size of the pupil and thought out actions such as moving a chair, there is another set of muscle movements over which we do not have any thinking control. Okay? Many of these involuntary actions are controlled by the midbrain and hindbrain. All these involuntary actions, including blood pressure, salivation, and vomiting, are controlled by the medulla in the hindbrain. So, some things that I forgot to mark about are these. Let me just read that before continuing. Brain and spinal cord constitute central nervous system. They receive information from all parts of the body and integrate it. The communication between the central nervous system and the other parts of the body is facilitated by the peripheral nervous system consisting of cranial nerves arising from the brain and spinal nerves arising from the spinal cord. The brain thus allows us to think and take action based on the thinking. The brain has three major parts or region, namely the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The forebrain is the main thinking part of the brain. Okay, and the forebrain are specialized for hearing, smell, sight, and so on. Okay, next. So, do we have to think about or remember to breathe or digest food? So, in between simple reflex actions like change in the size of the pupil and the thought out actions such as moving a chair, there's another set of muscle movements over which we do not have any control. Many of these involuntary actions are controlled by the midbrain and hindbrain. All these involuntary actions, including blood pressure, salivation, vomiting, are controlled by the medulla in the hindbrain. Think about activities like walking in a straight line, riding a bicycle that is, picking up a pencil. These are all possible due to a part of the hindbrain called the cerebellum. It is responsible for precision of voluntary action and maintaining the posture and balance of the body. Imagine what would happen if each of these events failed to take place if we were not thinking about it. That would be pretty bad. Now, how are these tissues protected? So we know that it is protected by the skull, but there are more parts. Okay. So a delicate organ like the brain, which is so important for a variety of the activities, needs to be carefully protected. For this, the body is designed so that the brain sits inside a bony box. There are a bunch of bones joined by immovable joints. Okay. Inside the box, the brain is contained in a fluid filled balloon which provides further shock absorption. If you run your hands through the middle of your back, you will feel a hard, bumpy structure. This is the vertebral column or the backbone which protects the spinal cord. Now, here also, we don't have much information about all the things that we have right now, we have been given right now. So, imagine this is your brain, and excuse my drawing. This brain, it is covered by a layer, okay, a layer of hard bone, okay, that are joined by immovable joints. Okay, this is like a box, and this box is known as the skull. And this skull behind it has a three three layers, okay, three layers which acts as shock absorbers, which again protects the brain, okay. And these three layers are called the meninges. These meninges also protect the brain. Okay, and these are the protections. Now, there's actually more. See, if you take the brain and you cross section it, okay, let's say you cut it. Here, we will have some ventricles of brain like these. And these ventricles also help in what? There are four ventricles. Now, these ventricles also help in protecting the brain. And these are filled with a fluid called the, let me think, cerebrospinal cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, and these change its shape on and rigidity when an impact is hit on the brain. Okay, so they help in protecting the brain. So yeah, also the spine, right? This was about the brain. Now, if you ever saw the picture of a human spinal cord, you will see that it is like a piece of cloth, like very like a piece of cloth. But then, if you touch your back right now, you will feel it like very hard and bony and things like that. This is because of the vertebral column. These vertebral columns are basically bones that protect your spinal cord. Okay, that is this point. This vertebral column or backbone protects your spinal cord. How does the nervous tissue cause action? So far we have been talking about the nervous tissue. Sorry. So far we have been talking about how the nervous tissue and talking about the nervous tissue and how it collects information, sends it around the body, processes information, makes decisions based on the information, and conveys decision to the muscles for action. In other words, when the action or movement is to be performed, muscle tissue will do the final job. Okay. Now, how do animal muscles move? When a nerve impulse reaches the muscle fiber must move. Okay. Now, how does a muscle cell move? Simplest notion of movement at the cellular level is that the muscle cells will move by changing their shape so that they shorten. Okay. So the next question is, how do muscle cells change their shape? The answer lies in the chemistry of the cellular components. Muscle cells have special proteins called contractile protein, I think. Okay, that change both their shape and their arrangements in the cell in response to the nerve's electrical impulses. When this happens, new arrangements of these protein give the muscle cells a shorter form. Remember when we talked about muscle tissues in class 9th, there were different kinds of muscles such as the voluntary and involuntary muscles. Based on what we have discussed so far, what do you think the differences between these would be? What is the difference between reflex action and walking? Reflex action is a sudden and spontaneous reaction to particular stimuli without actual thinking that follows a particular connection called the reflex arc. While walking is a voluntary action that is helped or it is assisted by the cerebrum in our brain. Okay, what happens at synapse between two neurons? Calcium ions enter the synaptic knot through the presynaptic membrane, attach themselves to the synaptic vesicles, bring the synaptic vesicles closer to the presynaptic membrane, and the neurotransmitters are going to diffuse into the this prosynaptic membrane through the synaptic cleft. Okay, and impulses are transferred basically. Which part of the brain maintains posture and equilibrium of the body? Cerebrum, right? Or is it cerebellum? Forgot. Cerebellum. Cerebellum is the thing. How do we detect the smell of an agarbatti? Diffusion, and using the help of the olfactory receptors. What is the role of the brain in reflex action? Um, Usually, when reflex actions happen, they follow a reflex arc, which is a sensory. This inputs are sent from a sensory neuron to the spinal cord, and a motor neuron responds to what output we must do in a spontaneous amount of time. Okay, and another nerve is also sent to the brain so that the brain can be informed of the dangers or what happened, so that the next time the person will be more careful. Okay, coordination in plants. So coordination in plants, animals have nervous system for controlling and coordinating the activities of the body, but plants have neither a nervous system nor muscles. So, how do they respond to stimuli? When we touch the leaves of a chui mui, that is the sensitive or touch me not plant of the mimosa family, they begin to fold and droop. When a seed germinates, the root goes down, the stem comes up into the air. What happens? Firstly, the leaves of the sensitive plants move very quickly in response to touch. There is no growth involved in this movement. On the other hand, the directional movement of the seedling is caused by growth. If it is prevented from growing, it will not show any movement. So, plants show two different types of movements, one dependent on growth and the other independent of growth. Immediate response to stimulus. Let us think about the first kind of movement, such as that of the sensitive plant. Since no growth is involved, the plant must actually move its leaf in response to touch. But there is no nervous tissue nor any muscle tissue. How does the plant detect the touch, and how do the leaves move in response? If we wait, hold on. If we think about where exactly the plant is touched and what part of the plant actually moves, it is apparent that the movement happening at it is apparent that movement happens at a point different from the point of touch. Now, so information that a touch has occurred must be communicated. The plants also use electrical chemical means to convey this information uh, from cell to cell. But unlike in animals, there is no specialized tissue in plants for the conduction of information. Finally, again, as in animals, some cells must be changed shape in order for movement to happen. Instead of the specialized protein found in an animal muscle cell, plant cells have by change shape by changing the amount of water in them, resulting in the swelling or shrinking and therefore changing in shapes. Next, movement due to growth. Some plants, like the pea plant, climb up other plants or fences by means of tendrils. These tendrils are sensitive to touch. When they come in contact with any support, the part of the tendril in contact with the object does not grow as rapidly as the part of the tendril away from the object. This causes the tendrils to circle around the object and thus cling to it more commonly. Plants respond to stimuli slowly by growing in a particular direction because this growth is directional. Okay, it appears as if the plant is moving. Let us understand this type of movement with the help of an example. Fill a conical flask with water like this. Cover the neck of the flask with a wide mesh like this. Keep 2 or 3 fleshy germinated bean seeds on the wide mesh like this. Take a cardboard box which is open from one side like this. Okay? Keep the flask in the box in such a manner that the open side of the box faces the light coming from the window. After 2 or 3 days, you will notice that the shoot bends towards light and roots away from the light. Now turn the flask so that the shoot are away from the light and the root towards the light. Leave it undisturbed in this condition for a few days. Have the old parts of the shoot and the root change direction? Are there differences in the direction of the new growth? What can we conclude from this activity? Okay, so environmental triggers such as light or gravity will change the directions that plant parts grow in. These directional or tropic movements can be either towards the stimulus or away from the stimulus. So, in different kinds of phototrophic movements, shoots respond by bending towards the light while roots respond by bending away from it. How does this help the plant? Okay, so the plants show tropism in response to other stimuli as well. The roots of a plant always grow downwards while the shoot usually grow upwards and away from the earth. Okay. Mm, this upward and downward growth of shoot and roots, respectively, in response to the pull of the gravity, is obviously geotropism. Okay. If hydro means water and chemo means chemicals, what would hydrotropism and chemotropism mean? Can we think of examples of these kind of uh, directional growth movements? One example of chemotropism is the growth of pollen tubes towards the ovules. Okay. About which we will learn more when we examine the reproductive process of living organisms in the next chapter. Let us now once again think about how information is communicated in the bodies of multicellular organisms. The movement of sensitive plant in response to touch is very quick. The movement of sunflower in response to day or night, on the other hand, is quite slow. Growth related movements of plants will be even slower. Even in animal bodies, there are carefully controlled directional growth. Our arms and fingers grow in certain directions, not haphazardly. Okay, so controlled movements can be either slow or fast. If fast responses to stimuli are to be made, information transfer must happen very quickly. For this, the medium of transportation must be able to move rapidly. Okay, now electrical impulses are excellent means for this method, but there are limitations to the use of electrical impulses. Firstly, they will reach only those cells that are connected by nervous tissue, not each and every cell in the animal body. Secondly, once an electrical impulse is generated in the cell will take some time to reset its mechanisms before it can generate and transmit a new impulse. In other words, the cells cannot continually create and transmit electrical impulses. It is thus no wonder that most multicellular organisms use another means of communication between cells, namely chemical communication. Instead of generating an electrical impulse, stimulated cells release a chemical compound. This compound would diffuse all around the original cell. If other cells around have the means to detect this compound using special molecules of their surfaces, then they would be able to recognize information and even transmit it. This will be slower, of course, but it can potentially reach all cells of the body regardless of nervous connections, and it can be done steadily and persistently. These compounds or hormones are used by multicellular organisms for control and coordination, uh, and it shows a great deal of diversity as we would expect. Different plant hormones help to coordinate growth, development, and response to the environment. They are synthesized at a place away from where they act and simply diffuse to the area of action. So let us take an example that we worked with earlier. So when plants are growing, the growing plants detect sunlight. A hormone called auxin synthesized at the shoot tip help the cells to grow longer. So auxin helps it to grow longer. When light is coming from one side of the plant, the auxin diffuses towards the shady side of the shoot. This concentration of auxin stimulates the cells to grow longer on the side of the shoot which is away from light. Thus, the plant appears to bend towards light. Okay, and another example of plant hormones are gibberellins, which, like auxins, help in the growth of the stem. Cytokinins promote cell division, and it is natural then that they are present in greater concentration in areas of rapid cell divisions like the meristematic tissues such as the fruits and seeds. These are examples of plant hormones that help in promoting growth, but plants also need signals to stop growing. Abscisic acids is one of example of a hormone which inhibits growth. Its effects include the whittling of leaves. Abscisic acid. You can't keep on growing forever, or you will be like that beanstalk from that story. I forgot which. Yep, Jack and the beanstalk. You'll be like that. What are plant hormones? Plant hormones are hormones which help in growth, cell division, etc. Okay, how is the movement? Their chemicals. Okay, some more facts. How is the movement of leaves of the sensitive plant different from the movement of a shoot towards light? The movement of leaves from from the sensitive plant is something called a nastic movement, which is neither away nor towards the stimulus but shoot towards the light. Shoot towards the light, it goes towards the light rather than away, or uh, neither towards nor away from the light. Now give an example of okay, this is also related to growth, and this is response to stimulus. Well, this is response to stimulus too, but it is also part of growth. Give an example of a plant hormone that promotes growth. Cytokinins. No. Auxin. Hmm, what is this? Abscisic acid, don't forget that. Auxin. How do auxin promote the growth of tendrils around a support? When a tendril touches a support, auxins, a plant hormone, accumulates on the side away from the support, causing cells that on that side to elongate more than those on the contact side, leading the tendrils to curl around the support. Makes sense. Design an experiment to demonstrate hydrotropism. Easy way. Take a moist cotton and you put some pea seeds on it. The pea will go like this, woo, and the root, however, will stay there. Okay, so this is positive hydrotropism, negative hydrotropism. And now here we have hormones in animals. How are such chemical or hormonal means of information transmission used in animals? What do some animals, for instance squirrels, experience when they are in a scary situation? Their bodies will have to prepare for either fighting or running away. Both are very complicated activities that will use a great deal of energy in controlled ways. Many different tissue types, however, will be used and their activities integrated together in these actions. However, the two alternative activities, fighting or running, are also quite different. So here's a situation in which some common preparations can be usefully made in our body. These preparations should ideally make it easier to do either activity in the near future. Uh, okay, how would this be achieved? Let's see. If the body design in the squirrel relied on the electrical impulses via nerves, the range of tissues instructed to prepare for the coming activity would be limited. On the other hand, if chemical signal were to be sent as well, it would reach all cells of the body and provide the wide ranging changes it needs. This is done in many animals, including human beings, using a hormone called adrenaline that is secreted from the adrenal glands. Okay, look figure 6.7 to look at these glands. 6.7. Yeah. These are the adrenal gland just above the kidneys. Okay, now adrenaline is secreted directly into the blood and carried to different parts of the body. The target organ or the specific tissue on which it acts includes the heart. Uh, As a result, the heart beats faster, resulting in supply of more oxygen to the muscle. The blood to the digestive system and skin is reduced to contraction of muscles around the small arteries in these organs. Now, this diverts the blood to our skeletal muscles. The breathing rate also increases because of the contractions of the diaphragm and the rib muscles. All these responses together enables the animal body to be ready to deal with the situation. Such animal hormones are part of the endocrine system, which constitute the second way of control and coordination in our body. Activity 6.3. Look at figure 6.7. Identify the endocrine glands mentioned in the figure. Some of these glands have been listed in table 6.1 and discussed in the text. Consult books in the library and discuss with your teachers to find out about the other glands. Remember that plants have hormones that control their directional growth. What functions do the animal hormones perform? On the face of it, we cannot imagine their role in directional growth. We have never seen an animal growing more in one direction and or the other, depending on light or gravity. But if we think about it a little more, it will become evident that even in animal bodies, growth happens in carefully controlled places. Plants will grow leaves in many places on the plant body. For example, but we do not grow fingers on our faces. The design of the body is carefully maintained even during the growth of children. Now, these, as you can see, helps us understand where the glands are. So, this is the pineal gland, okay, and again here, the hypothalamus is here. Hypothalamus is here too. Then we got the pituitary, okay, the thyroid glands, the parathyroid glands, okay, these two, and the thymus here. Parathyroid glands, these two, and the thymus, okay. Now this is the pancreas that is just behind the stomach, okay, that's there. And these are the adrenal glands. That's all the glands in this body. Rest are the reproductive organs and the kidneys, of course. Now, let us examine some examples to understand how hormones help in coordinating growth. We have all seen salt packets which say iodized salt or enriched with iodine. Why is it important for us to have iodized thyroxine hormone? Sorry, why is it important for us to have? Oh my god, I read it wrong. So, why is it important to have iodized salt in our diet? Iodine is necessary for the thyroid gland to make thyroxine hormone. Thyroxine regulates carbohydrates, proteins, and fats metabolism in the body so as to provide the best balance for growth. Iodine is essential for the synthesis of thyroxine. Okay. In case iodine is deficient in our diet, there's a possibility that we might suffer from a disease called goiter. Now, this is an assured one mark question. Assured one mark question. One of these symptoms is the disease. One of the symptoms in these diseases is swollen neck. Can you correlate this with the position of the thyroxine gland in 6.7? Thyroxine gland was in the neck. Sometimes we come across people who are either very short, that is dwarfs, or extremely tall, like giants. Have you ever wondered how this happens? Growth hormone is one of the hormones secreted by the pituitary. As its name indicates, growth hormone regulates growth and development of the body. If there is a deficiency of this hormone in childhood, it leads to dwarfism or gigantism. If there is too much, there is. You must have noticed many dramatic changes in your appearance as well as your friends as you approach 10 to 12 years of age. These changes associated with the puberty are because of the secretion of testosterone in males and estrogen in females. Last time I checked, that is on the 8th standard textbook, I was pretty sure the spelling of estrogen did not have an O. I don't know. Do you know anyone in your family or friends who has been advised by the doctor to take less sugar in their diet because they are suffering from diabetes? My grandma. As a treatment, they might be taking injections of insulin. This is a hormone which is produced by the pancreas and helps in regulating blood sugar levels. If it is not secreted in a proper amounts, the sugar level in the body rises, causing many harmful effects. If it is so important that hormone should be secreted in precise quantities, We need a mechanism through which this is done. The timing and amount of hormone released are regular by feedback mechanisms. For example, if sugar levels in blood rise, they are detected by the cells of the pancreas which respond to producing more insulin. As blood sugar level falls, insulin secretion is reduced. Now, do you know hypothalamus plays an important role in the release of many hormones? For example, when the level of growth hormone is low, the hypothalamus releases growth hormone releasing factor which stimulates the pituitary to release growth hormone. Now, growth hormone pituitary stimulates the growth of all organs. Now, the thyroxine gland has the hormone thyroid, if I'm correct. Or thyroxine, I'm not sure. Thyroxine. Insulin, it is released by the pancreas. Testosterone function. Okay, secondary sexual characters. Okay, that is the testosterone. Now, estrogen ovaries. Okay, adrenal glands prepare the body for stress. Okay, and releasing hormones. Hypothalamus stimulates the pituitary gland to release hormones. Questions. How does chemical coordination take place in animals? This much of what we said. Why is the use of iodine salt advisable for the increase of the thyroxine hormones? And how does our body respond when adrenaline is secreted to the blood? The heart rate increases and things like that that we discussed before. Why are some patients of diabetes treated by giving injections of insulin? Because insulin is low in their body and we need to add more insulin. By this chapter is over. Now, here's what we have learned: control and coordination are the functions of the nervous system and the hormones in our body. Okay, the response of the nervous system can be classified as reflex action, voluntary action, and involuntary action. The nervous system uses electrical impulses to transmit messages. Okay, the nervous system gets information from our sense organs, acts through our muscles. Okay, and the chemical coordination is seen in both plants and animals. Hormones produced in one part of an organism move to another part to achieve the desired effects. A feedback mechanism regulates the activity of the hormone. And by that, this chapter is over. Then we have the NCERT exercises which you can do from today's class. Thanks for watching and bye.